So I'm hoping I asked you last or yesterday, if possible, you can review the Intro to PHP lesson that we had maybe a few weeks ago. But it's all right if we haven't. We're just going to have a short review as to the introduction of PHP, and then after that we will proceed with the new topic, which is about exploring data types. So I know you guys already familiar with data types. So when you were still in first year, I was your instructor for ITS 101. We discussed about C++, and at some point we discussed about data types. All right. So can anyone remember or perhaps give us an example of one lang sa usara ka data type? Anyone?
Sir,
Go ahead, Lingay.
string,
String.
sir.
That's good. That's correct. All right. What else? Kinsa pa?
Char.
Integer.
Boolean, sir.
Karakter, sir, karakter.
Okay. We have characters. All right. So we have strings. We have integers, float or double float, and then we have characters. We have booleans, and then um, basically everything would be the same with PHP because most programming language of kuan kanang mostly nag-offer sila og similar na functionalities like data types, so on and so forth. So in this case, we will continue with PHP. We're going to learn the same thing about PHP. The only thing that differs is that in PHP, lahi ang yang syntax, but same process, same flow, same functionalities. Alright? So again, today we're going to discuss about PHP, the data types. If you have any questions, please share it by the end of this class, or you can also send it here in our in call messages here in Google Meet, or you can also send it in our Facebook chat group. So here are the data types that we are going to discuss today. We have strings, integers, floats, and later on, if not that time, we will continue with arrays. And notice that we don't have the other usual integer data types like cars there rather, and then there's a boolean, so on and so forth, because most of the time, these are the data types that we'll be using in PHP. And once you already have an idea on how strings, integers, floats, and arrays work in as data types in PHP, you'll get the idea naman po with the rest of the data types as well. Alright, so let's have a short review. The PHP stands for PHP Hypertext Preprocessor. PHP is commonly used in developing web-based applications, and PHP can contain text, HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and PHP scripts, of course. And then PHP have extension .php. So this is very important, especially once we are working on a web page already. Make sure that the file extension is .php, otherwise the PHP scripts will not work. Okay, and then to use PHP, we need a web stack. So what I have advised you to use is XAMPP for PC users, but for those who doesn't have any computers at home, you might as well just use the KS Web Pro using the link that I provided to you. So KS Web Pro, you have to pay for it in Google Play Store, but obviously we don't want that. That's why I sent you a link so you can download it for free. And then a PHP script always starts with an open angle bracket, question mark PHP. This is our opening tag, and then ends with question mark and then closing angle bracket. This is the closing tag. Each statement should end with a semicolon. So pretty much it's the same thing with C++, and perhaps in JavaScript. In Java as well. You should always end each statement with a semicolon. In declaring a PHP variable, it should start with a $sign. Alright? So if you can remember back when we're still discussing C++, to write a variable, we have to define the data type and then the variable name and then initialize the value. But in this case in PHP, we just have to write it with a $sign. We don't necessarily have to write the variable name, or the data type, because PHP will automatically understand what based on the value, diba? If you can remember, last in our intro to PHP discussion, when we write a variable, dili na nato ibutang if it's an integer or if it's a float, it is a string. No, we don't have to do that because PHP will just read the value and then use the appropriate data type. For example, if nibutang ka og number 1 or number 2 or any numbers, then PHP will use it as integer. However, if you use the value bitang gibutangan imong name or address, then PHP will use string as the data type. Then a variable name must start with a letter or an underscore. Otherwise, there should be no number. It should not start with a number. And make sure, or please remember, that variables are case sensitive. What do you mean by case sensitive again? Sige pasabot og case sensitive. Anyone? Anyone? Kinsay makinumdum, what do you mean by case sensitive?
Kailangan one-to-one ang syntax eh.
Okay, right? So when you say case sensitive, for example, we declared a variable for PHP, let's say variable, or let's say age na lang. If this is the variable that you declared, and you on your program, somewhere in your program, you use this. All right, is this two the same?
No.
Okay, no, because PHP is case sensitive. So age with all lowercase and age with one uppercase means different. Laylay siya nga variable because again, PHP is case sensitive. So meaning whatever it is, however it is that you declare your variable, it should be the same way if you're going to use it for your program. Alright, so this is an example of a basic PHP syntax. So first and foremost, PHP should be written inside the power of PHP is that you'll be able to design it. However, you cannot design it directly to the PHP script. It has to be embedded to an HTML file so that the PHP will be pwede na itong ma-designan. Nana. So that's why, in this case, we have a standard HTML structure. And then inside the body, that's where we're going to add the PHP scripts. And then this is the only PHP script here. It starts with the opening tag and then a closing tag. So the rest would be HTML. So remember, PHP, to make it easy to design, it should be written inside an HTML file. So that's why we have basic HTML structure and then the PHP is inside. And this should be the output. And then declaring variables. Okay, variables are containers for storing information. So from the term suggests variable, meaning the value of the variables varies, meaning it can be changed however you want it. For example, first is you declared text as a string, and then somewhere in the program you can replace the value, which is hello world, with something else. That's why it's called variables, because the value varies, meaning pwede siyang mausog. Alright, so again, remember, when you assign a text value to a variable, put quotes around the value, especially if this is going to be a string. So if we're going to declare a variable that will contain a string, excuse me, wait a. Alright, so if we're going to declare a variable that contains a string, then the string must be enclosed with double quotation. However, if it's going to be any integral value, when say integral value, mga values that has numerical, that is numbers like float or integers, you don't have to enclose it with anything. Right? Again, if you'll be declaring a variable which is string, make sure to enclose it with unsa lang gani?
Sir. Quotation.
Double quotation, just like this. And remember, variables should always start with the variable name, rather should start with $sign. So if you can remember, if we are using C++, unsaon siguro nato ni paggama og kani, how are we going to convert this variable into a C++. For example, the first one. You can remember it should be like this. String text is equals to hello world, right? Is this how we write it in C++? We start with
sir.
the data type and then the variable name and then the value. All right. However, in PHP, again, we don't necessarily have to write the data type because PHP will automatically use the appropriate data type based on the value that you initialized. So in PHP, you just have to write the variable name starting with the $sign and then the value. And then after that, PHP will determine, pagbasa niya ni, uy, it's group of text or group of symbols. That means this should be a string. Automatically, gagamiton niya ni as string. Alright, so for our next lesson, PHP exploring data types. The data types determines which type of data to be used in the program. So PHP supports the common data types including string, integer, float or double, characters, arrays, boolean, etc. Compared to C++, defining the data type is not needed in writing the variable. PHP will automatically use the appropriate data type based on the value. So just like what we've been talking a while ago. And for example, we are going to create a string or a variable that contains I love programming. So if we be using C++, it should be written like this: string and then a variable name text and then equals the value I love programming. However, in in PHP, you just have to write the variable directly, but start with a $sign and then equals and then the value. Lang. So that's the difference between C++ and PHP. So let's start with the first data type. That's going to be string. So again, you should already have basic knowledge with this. What we're going to do now is to learn how string or how these data types is written using PHP. Let's start with the string. String is a set of characters like letters, symbols, and numbers. It is defined inside quotation mark. Alright, either single quotation or double quotation mark. So in PHPDI, once we are dealing with string, it should be enclosed with, or the value must be enclosed with quotation mark. Now, in C++, it has to be double quote. But in PHP, you can either use single quote or double quote, regardless. And then in non-programming terms, string is the same as text. That's correct. If we're not programmers, we will call string as text. However, in programming, it is called string. Now, the string, again, can be either letters, symbols, or numbers. And an example of using strings are for names. So for example, if we're going to create a program that will deal with names, addresses, titles, descriptions, sentences, or any data that has multiple characters or multiple symbols or multiple characters, then that is when we are going to use string. So let's have a few examples. Let's open up our text editor. Alright, so first is let's go to our PHP folder. Sorry, htdoc folder. There. So in your case, if you're using XAMPP, go to the installation folder in my drive. In my case, it's in drive D and XAMPP and then htdocs. That's for if you're using XAMPP on PC. But if you're using KS Web Pro, usually it's in the internal storage and go directly to htdocs. And that is where you're going to create your project, or that is where you're going to save your PHP files. So here I'm going to create a folder. Let me call it discussions. And we have here, and this is where we're going to put in our PHP files. And then let me open it up. And we'll start with a new file. Let's call it string.php. Alright, so that's the basic HTML structure. And then we'll call it, for the title, let's call it string. By the way, guys, make sure that you're on full screen because I'm using, let me see if ma-zoom in ba na ako ni. Control Alt plus. Control Alt. So, ang pag, pesa. Pwede rin ma-zoom in. But anyway, if you're using mobile device, make sure that you set your phone to full screen para makita niyo yung mga codes. So again, we'll add a title string, and then we will write our PHP scripts using with a string variable. So again, to write your script, we should always start with the opening tag, which is PHP, and then let's close it. And inside this tag will be our PHP script. So let's try to declare a variable using, or let's just go on. Let's try to print a simple string. Let's try to display a simple string, and then unsa lang ganito nga code atong gamiton to display a text in PHP. Nalimot, it's echo. All right. If it's C++, we will use cout. In Java, we will call it print that line that. Isa to sa Java, print line. Kinsam kinumdum. Nalimot lagi ko. Anyway, let's say hello world. So already this is a string, right? Because string doesn't necessarily have to be declared. So we are trying to display a string in our program, and to display it, we have to write echo. That is a command to display it on the screen. Let's save that and let's open it up. Let me turn on my XAMPP real quick. Okay, and let's open it up. Localhost and then ITS 306 PHP and then discussion slash string.php. Hindi lagi makita. Discussions are edit sa one PHP. Hold on. Discussion htdocs ITS306 discussions s. It says here hello world. So this is an example of a string, and notice that we enclosed it with double quote. Now let's try this time using a single quote to check whether or not it's really true. So let's add a BR code. This will allow us to go to the next line. Let's add another one, and let's say single quote, I love programming. Let's save that and let's check. Alright, it also worked, diba? Even though we only used single quote. Alright, so again, remember that we can either use double quote or just a single quote, and then we can also output an HTML tag. So because HTML tag is also a string, that's why we're able to add this HTML tag. This will command us to go to the next page. Alright, so this time let's try to display a PHP string using a variable. So let's add another PHP here. Alright, it's okay. Let's add a break line, and then let's add another PHP code. Let's add an H3 or H1. Let's say PHP variables here. let's try to create a variable, a string variable. And again, to write the variable, we'll start with a $sign, and let's say text1. Text na lang is equals to samay ako ibutan dali. I love programming. I love PHP na lang. I love PHP. And then, so this is gonna be our text1. And let's have another. Alright, it's okay. Instead of, text1 will be hello. And then let's add another variable. Let's say text2. And the value would be world. Alright, let's try to output this variable using concatenation. So let's add another variable. Let's call it phrase. And then we can combine text1 and text2 in creating variables as well. So let's have another variable, and let's use the value of the first variable, which is text1, and then concatenate it, and then text2. Alright, so unsa kay ito pasabot og concatenation gani? What do you mean by concatenation?
Combine, sir.
Okay, that's right, combining strings. So basically, we all know that our text1 is hello, and then text2 is world. Now we created another variable that contains the value of text1 concatenated with the value of text2. So how did we concatenate it? We used dot. Basically, that's it. To concatenate a variable in PHP or concatenate string, we just have to add dot. Basically, tantangan na to na. Okay. So if we're going to save it as it is, just like this one, if we're going to save it and reload, this is what's text1. Save that, reload. This is what's gonna happen. PHP and then variables. Ano mo na display? Wala man ako echo. Hold on. Echo phrase. Tara, hello world. Pero wala siya space, di ba? Because nagtapot ra siya. So how do we add a space between hello and world? We will add another concatenation with an empty space. So how to add how to add a space? So we will add double quote and then put a space on it, and then concatenate. Alright, so basically to concatenate, to combine strings, you just have to add a dot and then the variable name. And then remember, if you're going to write a string value, it needs to be enclosed with double quote. That's why, as for the space here, we added double quote. So by doing this, if we're going to save that and then reload, we're able to add a space between the hello and okay. So there's also another way of concatenation. So let's call it concatenation. Okay, let's have another one. Let's call it let's add an h1, and let's say another way of concatenating strings, and let's add another PHP tag or script. Okay, this is the difference between using double quote and single quote. So, diba, atong gi-emphasize na that we can use double quote and single quote. It will work. However, there is a few difference. There is a small difference when it comes to using double quote or single quote in writing a string or displaying or outputting a string. So let's start with, let's have another variable, let's have another display command here, and let's call it, hold on. We will create a, we will create a, we will use this variable in displaying it on our screen. So let's say echo, and then double quote, and then let's say phrase. How are you? Alright, so if we're going to write it this way, it will basically, it's the same thing in writing, in concatenating, diba? Instead of writing it this way, we can also just write directly the variable name inside the double quote and then the string. Alright, so let's try that. Let's reload. Dara, nigana rin gyapon siya, or tatama na to ang period. So nigana rin gyapon. Do you see it? Did you see it? So we can, aside from writing it this way, aside from concatenating strings this way, we can also just write it this way. So you just have to write the variable name inside the double quote, and it works just fine, just like this. So let's try single quote. Let's try doing that again, but this time we will use single quote. Okay, dire na siya ang difference between a double quote and a single quote. In a single quote, the word phrase or the variable is not declared. Dili na siya mo display ang variable. So that's why if we're going to reload it, the word phrase will display. This wala siya ni convert into an actual variable. So again, if we're going to concatenate using this way, it needs to be enclosed with double quotation. Alright? So there's also another way of concatenating using this kaning nga paagi. So we will write our variable inside curly brackets. So we have four ways now in concatenating. We can either use it using this, we can also write using this, or using this, or three pa lang di ay. Let's save that and let's reload. May work kag happen. Alright? So in concatenating strings, there are three ways in doing so. Using the standard one, the common one basically, and there you can also use this and this. Alright, do you follow? Do you follow, guys?
Sir.
Yes,
Yes,
sir.
sir.
Alright, so there are three ways on concatenating strings. It could be either strings and variables, or variables, all variables, or all strings. So let's save that and then let's proceed. So I have here a script. Basically, nadre ang source code and going to send it to you guys so that you can practice it on your own. So next, let's talk about string functions. First is, what exactly are functions? So functions allow easier and faster coding processes. Here are a few string functions. So this is where dire pinaka-powerful ang PHP when it comes to comparing it to other programming languages. Dire mo, kumbaga mo, stand out ang PHP using its functions. Functions are let's say commands, or basically these are functions that will allow us to make this programming much easier using PHP. So there are tons of functions available for string alone, and to check on that, just go to www.w3schools.com/php/php slash dash underscore string.asp. And then for this discussion, we're just going to talk about a few of them. Let's start with the first one. So start to lower. The first function is start to lower. Converts the entire string to lowercase. So basically, for us to be able to convert, for example, nagama taog string, we declare a variable contains a string, and we want to transform that into all lowercase, then we will use this function. Alright, so let's try that. Let's open up our text editor. Let's create a new file. Let's call it string functions dot php, and then let's call it string functions. Alright, and then we will write our PHP code, script rather. So let's say, for example, we are going to create, hold on. Alright, we're going to create a variable. So let's say variable first, and the value would be the quick brown fox. Let's set it to all, ano na lang, sakura. Quick brown fox. And then let's have another variable. Let's say second jumps over or jumped over the lazy dog. And then we're going to create a third variable that will combine the first and the second. Third is equals to first and second. Right? So still we're using concatenation. Now, so this would be our variable. We have variable first that contains the quick brown fox, and then the second variable contains jumped over the lazy dog, and then a third variable that combines the first and the second. So meaning the value for the third should be, it should display the quick brown fox jump over the lazy dog. Am I correct? Is this the value of the third variable? Yes, because we combine the first and the second using concatenation. Remember, this is how we're going to concatenate it this time. So let's try to apply the string functions. Okay, so ako lang, copy paste lang ako para madali ta. I'm going to copy this and then paste it right here. So again, this is how we're going to write a variable, a string function, a function rather. Let me erase na lang ni. So look it. So we'll start with, let's butangan na to og label nga lowercase, and then php. So we will display the third variable, okay? But this time we're going to transform it into all lowercase. So let's say echo and then third. Now let's check how it looks like for the meantime. Let's save that. Reload. Let's open it up. So instead of string, let's add string functions.php. String function. Tada. So it is set to lowercase. Tesa. Kadali lang. Bahigon rin ako kadali. So let's say string functions. Okay, so we have here the lowercase, and it says the quick brown fox jumped over the lazy dog. Now, kabante mo, ang first nga letter is capital, di ba? Naka-uppercase ang first letter. So by adding a lowercase function, by adding this, it will convert the entire string to lowercase. So how are we going to do that? We're going to write str to lower, meaning string to lower, and then we're going to enclose our variable with a parentheses. So this time we transform our variable or our string to all lowercase. Again, how did we do that? We add this function str to lower, meaning string to lower. And if we're going to save that, let's reload. Tara. So, ang T, ni lowercase na siya. Do you see it? Do you see it, guys?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Next, let's convert the next function, the start to upper. Kung save na po ko dere. Dapat na na-RD. Let me write it. Na-RD. Okay. String to upper converts the entire string to uppercase. So let's do that. Let's create another one, and let me just copy it. So let's say uppercase, and then so we will write start string to upper, and then all of this should be transformed into uppercase. So let's check. Tara. Let's hold on. Let me add dbr tag. Tara. The uppercase, it transformed the entire string to uppercase. So that's the second function. Next is we have UC first, converts the first word of the string to uppercase. So let's try that. So the next function, which is UC first, converts the first word of the string to uppercase. So basically it's the same thing that we did originally. So let me just copy this. Let's check how it looks like. Nara. Uppercase first. So the first letter will be transformed back to uppercase. So the first letter will be of the string will be set to uppercase. And then the next we have UC words, converts the first letter in each word of the string to uppercase. So let's try that. Uppercase words, and then instead of UC first, let's say UC words and break line. We're going to reload it. Ano po? Tara. All of the letters, the first letters of all the words starts with uppercase. So we're able to transform that. Bate mo, they, the quake, the brown, the fox, all have capital letters for the first letter. And then we have here str length, meaning is string length. It returns the length of the string. So the str length will count all the letters or symbols or characters inside the string and display it on the screen. So let's try that. So str length, meaning string length. Let's save it. Let's reload. Here it says 46. Because if we're going to count this, the entire thing, it should have 46 characters to it. So that is string length. And then we have here string repeat repeats the string a specified number of times. So let's try that. Let's call it repeat. Let's call it str underscore repeat. And then here, there are duwa ka book imong ibutang sa iyang parentheses. First is you're going to write the variable nga imong balik-balikon, and then next you're going to add a comma, and then you have to enter how many times do you want the string to repeat. So let's say 2. Alright, so again, str repeat repeats the string multiple times. The first thing that you're going to write inside the parentheses would be the variable that you want to display, and how many times do you want to display. So in this case, let's try 2. Let's save that, and then let's reload. Tada! The quick brown fox jumped over the lazy dog. The quick brown fox jumped over the lazy dog. Kaduwa siya ni display. If we will add more, let's say we will add, let's say 3, then katulo po siya mo balik-balik, just like that. Okay, do you follow, guys?
Yes, sir.
Yes,
Okay.
sir.
And
Yes,
then
sir.
string str, meaning it finds the first occurrence of a string inside another string. So what does it mean? Basically, it will we're going to find a specific word inside our string, and then it will only display starting from that word and then to the end. All right, let me just show to you how it works. So let's say find. So str, we will try to find the word brown inside the variable. So same thing that we did. First, we will write the variable ug asa nato pangitaon na ang word, and then next is we will enter what is the word that we are trying to find. So in this case, the word brown. And then let's close it. Let's add a break line. Let's save it. So what it does is pangitaon ni ang word nga brown sa atong the quick brown fox, and then it will only display starting from the brown fox jump over the lazy dog, meaning kanay taguan na niya ang the quick. It will only start from the brown up until the end. So let's try that. Let's save. Let's reload. Here. Ang nakabutang lang is brown fox jumped over the lazy dog, because this is how find or string within a string function works. Basically, if you're going to try to find a word inside a string, kita nakagigam nga paragraph and pangitaon nimo asa dapita ang word nga mo gipangita, then you will need to use the string inside string na function, and then it will display starting from that word that you're trying to find up until the end. Okay. Next is we have string replace. Okay, so string replace, this is one of the most common and pinaka-useful na use of string function is the replace. It replaces a part of a string with another string. So meaning, we'll be able to replace the words or any string. For example, ganahan ka nga usbon ang usa ka word, then you can also do that. So let's call it replace. And this is how we're going to write it. So PHP. So same, let's display echo, and then we'll add our function with str underscore replace, and then here tulo ka ang ato ibutang inside our double quote. First is we're going to enter ug unsa nga word ang atong islan. So for example, we'll replace the word quick, diba? Katong word nga quick, this one right here, we will replace it with something else. So that's the first thing that we're going to enter, ug unsa ang atong islan. So this will be enclosed with double quotes since this is a string. And then comma, and then after that, we're going to write unsa atong i-replace. Okay? So first nakita na nato ang quick, and what would be the word that we're going to replace it with. So let's say super fast, and then once nabutang na nato og unsa atong replacean, then that's the time that we're going to add asa nato ni pangitaon ning quick, asa pangitaon ang quick. So asa nakasave siya? Naa siya sa third nga variable. So that is where we're going to add the variable. Okay, so let's review. The str replace or string replace will allow us to change the word, basically. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to enter what word to replace. Next is what word to replace it with. And asa nato pangitaon kana nga word. The address, kumbaga, og asa nakasave ang word. So let's save that. And then let's reload. It should display the super fast brown fox jumped over the lazy dog. So this is one of the most pinaka-useful nga function. The string is the replace. Alright? So for example, let's add another one. Replace na nato ang kaning dog. Isla nato ang dog. And then let's call it man. Alright? So unsa mahitabo? If replace na nato ang dog ug man, unsa lang siguro mabutang na ron? It should display unsa lan? Anyone? It should say the quick brown fox jumped over the lazy man. Or the super fast rather. The super fast. Let's say if ma-appeal ba tong the super fast. Let's say wala, dili siya ma-save as super fast is because we displayed as echo right away. But anyway, it should display the quick brown fox jump over the lazy man. Let's reload. Tada. Quick brown fox jump over the lazy man. Okay? So that, ladies and gentlemen, is the functions for string. And then again, these are not the only functions for string. Obviously, there are tons of more of string functions that you can use. So just go to W3 schools and then reference. Go to PHP as maron. Go to PHP as maron. PHP dara. Learn PHP and then scroll it down. Go to reference and then look for string dara. And then these are the strings and then the description on how to use them. So we have here add C slashes. Alright. So kanay daghan kayo. And if you wanted to learn more about it, might as well just practice it. You can try how these functions work. You can try it yourself and see how these functions work. Alright, so that is functions. Strings rather. Tada. Next, integer. Integer is a data type with numerical value of whole number. It could be either positive or negative. So integer, sometimes we call it numbers, di ba? It is defined without any enclosure or quotation mark. And in a programming term, not string, but integer is the same as numbers. So, muna siya pinaka-common nga term. If we are not using programming term, we call it numbers. But in programming, it's called integers, meaning whole numbers. Walay pakapin. It's not decimal, it's not fraction, but it's whole, either positive or negative. Example of using integers are for age, arithmetic operation, counting, and many more. Alright? So basically, it's the same thing on how I've been doing with string. So let's add a new file here. Let's call it integer.php, and then let's rename it with integer. So let's create a variable. and then let's say var1 is equals to 3. Alright, so again, once we're dealing with numbers or integers, you don't necessarily have to enclose it with anything, because you will only enclose a value with quotation if it's a string. But if it's numbers, you don't have to, like numbers like integers or float. So we'll have another variable tool. Let's say it's 4, and variable age is equals to 25. Alright, so these are examples of integers. Now, remember, wala nato siya butangi og word nga integer or int or whatsoever, because once we declare the value, and if PHP find a number inside it, it will automatically use integer as its data type. Alright, so let's say I am, let's say PHP, and then echo age years old. Alright, so to call a variable, so we're just going to use, of course, the PHP tag and then echo age. Ano bang butangan nato PHP? Because since naka HTML ta right now, for us to be able to use a PHP code, we have to enclose it with PHP script. So that's why we can say I am and then echo age, meaning we're trying to display the value of age, which is 25, and then years old. Let's check that. Let's save it, and let's open it up. Integer.php. It will say I am 25 years old. We can either change the value of our age, let's say 35. Let's save it. Then it will also say I am 35 years old. Okay. And we can also perform mathematical operations. Since this is integer, we can also perform mathematical operations or arithmetic operation. So for example, let's say basic, let's call it basic math. Alright, so let's try to add, so let's say echo, and then let's enclose, for us to be able to perform an arithmetic operation, we have to enclose it with single quote. So let's say for example, pwede na pagdili, echo, let's say var1 plus var2. Okay, and then br, let's save that. It will also perform mathematical operations. So it will say 7 because 3 plus 4 is equals to 7. Alright, let's add another one. Okay, let's have another a more complicated nga math. Dili siya complicated kaya, but more complicated. So let's say echo, and then we're going to enclose with the double quote. Let's say 1 plus 2, 1 plus 2 plus variable 1, not hash but $sign. Okay, so we set 1 plus 2 plus the value of variable 1, which is 3. Alright, and then let's make it more complicated. Let's multiply it with var2. Right, so if you can remember back when you back when you were still having your algebra, once we are going to deal with multiple arithmetic operation, we follow this we follow the isa lang to katong MDAS property. So we'll start with, or FEMDAS rather, we start with the parenthesis, exponential, and then MDAS, multiplication, division, addition, and subtraction. So if this is gonna be our formula, so what unsay unang buhaton? If this is gonna be our formula, what would be the first operation to be executed?
Inside the parentheses, sir.
Okay, inside the parentheses. So meaning it will perform 1 plus 2 plus variable 1 first before it will multiply to variable 2, right? Let's save that. Let's add a BR na lang para automatic break the line. Let's save that and then let's reload. It says here 24. Let's check calculator. Let's open up calculator. So we have 1 plus 2 plus, say variable 3. Alright, so we have 1 plus 2 plus value sa atong variable 1, 3. Diba? 3 is 6 multiplied by the value of variable 2 which is 4. So times 4 equals 24. Let's check mo ba? Wow. Alright. So we can add more to make it more complicated. So how about if we're going to divide the whole thing? Okay, let's enclose it with another parenthesis. Let's divide it by let's say 2 minus 5. Okay, mas komplikado na siya. Alright, so first, this time usay sunod after ni execute and then multiplied by variable 2 and then which is 24, and then it will perform a division of 2 minus 5. Correct? Because m dash mangyapon. So after, di ba ang answer ani is 24, this one right here, and after that we divided it by 2, and then after that we will subtract 5. So let's save that and let's check what's the answer. 7. Let's check calculator. So we have 24 divided by 2 and minus 5. The answer is 7. Okay, so basically I will no longer teach you how to perform the arithmetic operations, since we've already done that during your algebra, and we've also done that during our C++ discussion. So basically it's the same thing. It's the same thing with what we've been doing with arithmetic operation. All right. So let's talk about the koan. Let me copy here. Let me copy some codes in here so that I can show to you the other arithmetic operation. So we have here addition. So let's say for example, ang var2, let's replace it with var2 plus 4, and then add subtraction, we're going to minus 4, and then multiply it by 3, divide it by 4, and then increment and decrement. So we've discussed that during our C++ discussion. So increment means we're going to add 1, diba? We're going to add 1 to our value. Decrement is we're going to minus it or subtract 1 from the value. So basically it's the same thing. We're going to save that and reload. So we have here. So for example, let's go back to our code. So our variable 2 is 4. We added 4, meaning the answer should be 8. Is that right? 8. So now that our variable 2 is 8, we will subtract 4. So the answer should be 4. Correct. Okay. Now our variable 2 is 4 again. We'll multiply it by 3. The answer should be 12. Just like that. And now since our variable is 12, we'll divide it by 4. Then the answer should be 3. Let's check. Tada, 3 ang iyang answer. And since our variable 1 is 3, we will add 1 to increment. The answer is 4. And then our variable 2, which is 4, we'll minus it with, since our variable 2 is 3, gikan dire, we'll minus it with 1, then the answer should be 2. Just like that. Okay? I think I don't necessarily have to discuss the arithmetic operation, since we've been doing this for quite a while. Am I right? Or do you have any questions? Okay. Do you follow, or am I talking too fast? Do you follow, guys? Okay, that's good.
Yeah, sir.
All right. And next. Okay, napare functions. Alright, so let's try some integer functions. So again, functions allow easier and faster coding process. So here are a few things. Here are a few integer functions. We have ABS, returns the positive value of an integer. ABS stands for absolute value. Unsay pasabot og absolute value? Try to dig into your algebraic knowledge daw. What do you mean by absolute value? Kinsa makahinumdum sa ilang algebra what absolute value means. Okay, for example, na ako'y number nga let's say 255. What is the absolute value of negative 255? Anyone? Kinsa makahinumdum sa ilang algebra? Anyone? Okay. Wala. Absolute value means the positive value. Okay? Right, that means the absolute value of negative 255 is unsa?
255.
Okay, 255. Alright, so when you say absolute value, it is the positive value. So, how about if kani? Ano? Alright, what is the absolute value of 18?
18.
18 direct hapon. Alright, so again, the absolute value is the positive value. So, by writing the ABS, basically it returns the positive value. So, it transforms the any negative value to positive. Okay, so let's try that. Let's create a new file. Let's call it integer functions.php, and then let's rename it to integer functions. And let me just copy this. So let's add a title h3 and let's say integer functions. So let me just copy and paste it para madali ta. So what is the absolute value of negative 300? So if we're going to save that and let's open it up. The absolute value is, instead of negative 300, it is now positive 300. Next is we have exponential or power. Returns the exponential value of an integer. So for example, if we're going to write something like this, if we're going to compute it program, kaning hold on. For example, we will compute this 2 kana. Right, 2 to the 8th power. So that means it's an exponential. Am I right? Mo ba ni? Mo ba ni exponential, guys?
Yes, sir.
Okay, let me change the color para klaro. So for example, natay 2 to the 8th power. So this is an example of an exponential value. So we can compute this using PHP easily. We'll use the pow function. So let's try that. Alright, so we have here 2, 8. So we'll start with the base number, kumbaga kani, number 2, and then we'll write the exponential value, or the exponent, kumbaga. So the base number and the exponent using pow function. Let's save that, and then let's reload. So it'll say 256 now. Is that right? Let's compute. So let's say 2 to the 8, hold on, 2 to exponent, saan pag-compute ni? 8, sakto ba? Save. Kubal mo gamit calculator. Adarada. 2 and then 8. The answer should be 56. 256. Tara. And then next, square root. SQRT, meaning that S the square root, returns the square root value of an integer. So let's open it up. So nindot ang PHP because we don't necessarily have to write the entire formula because these are already given as function. So square root. So we'll compute the square root of 100. For example, square root of 100 is, let's reload. Tara, square root is 10. So let's replace that with another number. Okay, so yun na naman ang square root. Let's say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Kana, square root of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Let's reload. Tara, 351.36 and so on. And then we have fmod. Divides two integer, returns only the remainder value. Okay, it's called modulo. You can remember modulo, guys. So C++. So basically, if let's say, what is the modulo or what is the remainder of, let's say, 8 divided by 3? Anyone? The modulo value of 8 divided by 3. Anyone? Okay, let's compute na lang. I-compute na lang ko nato. Sir, mga tahanap pa din siya. Okay. So let's call it, oops. So let's say, for example, 8 divided by 3. Let's check what is the modulo of 8 and 3. The answer is 2 because 8 divided by 3 is 2, remainder 2, correct?
Yes, sir.
Alright, and then random or rand returns any random number. So this is useful. For example, we're just going to create, for example, magama ta og system that will generate numbers. Let's say magama ka og system para tuan ticket. Let's say ticket or raffle nga system, and then mo generate ra siya og random nga number. So this is very useful. So let's go ahead and copy and paste it. Let's create a random number. So to do so, we will write echo and then rand, and then just leave it empty to create a any random number. Let's reload here. Oops, let's add a BR on the second one. Dara. So since this is random, every time that I'm going to reload, mag-usab-usab pod ang iyang number nga i-display every time nga akong i-reload ang screen. Because this is random, diba? Alright. Now we can also set any limit. So right now, obviously, this is an unlimited number. So we can set a limit. So like you copy paste it. So for example, we only want numbers from 1 to 100. Okay. What if we only want number from 1 to 100? So we're going to write it this way. So we'll set the minimum value and the maximum value. So we have here 1, that is the minimum, and then 100, that is the maximum value. Let's save that. Let's reload here. So we have 8. Let's reload it again. We have 3. We have 6. 53. 13. 81. Alright. So that is how you're going to generate random numbers. Alright, so far, do you have any questions? Do you still follow, guys?
Yes, sir.
Okay, please
Yes,
make sure to
sir.
take note, guys. Okay, after any assessment, live assessment. Okay, next. Alright, to see the complete list of integer functions, just go to W3's course. Actually, napailaan nga website po to check the functions. That is the php.net. Okay, php.net. And then go to, I think it's in documentation. This is the official page by the way of PHP. And asa mo to nakabutang? Documentation. Okay, there are English. We have to select English, and then PHP manual ba to? Tayo sa pangitaan sa nako ha para i-google na lang nato PHP functions. Dayon pangitao nato ang php.net dara. User defined. Hold on. Pangitao na ko ato dapita ang dara functions. Hi. Dara functions. So go to php.net/manual/en/language.functions, and then we have here user defined function. We have variable functions. So if you're going to click on the variable, because that is what we've been doing now. And here it is. We have dara. So we have array diff assoc. So here you can just select all the you can choose whatever function that you want to use. Ano lang. But pinakasayon nga pangitaan og function is ang W3 scale skill. Kaya naka-arrange na siya daan. Next, we have float data type. So float, also called floating point number, is a number with decimal point or a number in an exponential form, meaning it is a fraction of a number. So it is defined without any enclosure or quotation marks, and in non-programming term, sayop na po ni siya, float is the same as decimal points. Okay? Example of using float are for computing average, rates, divisions, and more. So if we are expecting a value that will contain decimal points, basically that is gonna be a float. All right, so let's open our editor. Let's create a new file. Let's call it float.php. And let's replace it with float. So we'll create a variable called float, and then let's say .14, right? So if we're going to display that, it will display 3.14. Now, how do we know that it is already a float? So we'll try to add any other number to it, and let's see if it will behave correctly. So let's say we'll say echo float plus, let's add another number, let's say 7. Then if it is a float, meaning ang 0.14 magpabilin rin gihapon na siya. If it's gonna be an integer, then ang 0.14 mawala. Mahimo ra siyang 10 something. So let's save that and let's reload. Here it says here 10.14. That means the 14 has been carried over. That means that is a float. So again, going back, float, example of using float are for computing average, rates, division, and more. So let's try that. Okay, let me start with a division. So echo is 3 divided by 4. We know that that is going to be some kind of a fraction because 3 is smaller than 4. So therefore, it should return a float. Let's try. Division. The answer is 0.75. So again, float will be used for most of the time with division. Let's have another one. Let's say average. Let's say average of 3 numbers. We have here 3 numbers. We have 25, 13, and 3. So to get the average, first is we need to add them and then divide it by the number of numbers. Okay. So since we have 3 numbers here, we divide it by 3 after we added it. So let's save that and let's reload. Here, the average is 13.67. Do you follow, guys? Or am I talking too fast?
Answer.
Okay.
Okay,
So this time we'll try to compute rates. Let's say the speed rate. Not the speed rate. Kinabaganing speed sa sakyanan or motor. So how do we compute the speed? So the formula is speed is equals to distance over time. So we will compute how long or the distance between 2 points, let's say from Ayungon to Bais, and then how long will it take me to travel, let's say 1 hour, then that's going to be the distance divided by the hour, that is the speed that I'm going. So let's say for example the distance is 236, that is the variable distance, and then the time it took to travel is 1.5 hours, so 1.5. And then therefore, to compute the speed, we have speed is equals to distance over time. That means speed is equals to distance divided by time. That means 236 divided by 1.5. And if we're going to save that and then let's reload, the speed is 157.33. Okay, so that is the common use of float is to compute divisions, averages, rates, so on and so forth. Alright, so let's discuss a few functions. So again, functions allow easier and faster coding process. Here are a few float functions. We have round. Rounds the float to a specific decimal place. So when you say round, okay, kasabot mo kung say round up or round down, di ba?
Yes,
Correct?
sir.
Alright, so usually, kung yung nga round the number, the nearest 10th value, the nearest 100. So let's say natay 3.1416. Alright, so what would be the value if we are going to round it to the nearest 10? What is the what would if we're going to round up 3.1416 to the nearest 10th value? Unsa lay answer? Nalimot na?
3.14.
3.14. That's right. How about if we're going to round it to the nearest 100 value?
3.141.
Okay, something like that. All right. So basically, it's the same thing. Rounds the float to a specific decimal place. So for example, if we're going to round it to 1 decimal place, so we're just going to remove the rest of, and may mura siyang 3.1 if we're going to round it to 1 decimal place or the 10th value. So let's check. Let's try that. Let's create a new file. Let's call it float functions.php, and then same thing, let's call it float function. So let's say this is gonna be our float number 3.1416. Okay, so the first function is the round. Round it up to the specified decimal place. So let's say we will round it to 2 decimal places. So first is we're going to write the number, in this case the variable float, the 3.1416, and then next is we will write the decimal place. So the number, comma, and then the decimal places. So if we're going to save that, and then reload, let's say float underscore function dot php, then tara. Since we rounded to 2 decimal places, we have 3.14. Alright? How about if we're going to round it just 1 decimal place? Save that and let's reload. Then it will round to 3.1. Again, to round it to a specific number of places, we will write the float number, and then the number of decimal place we're going to round it down or round it up. So let's skip it to 2, and then next is we have ceiling. The ceiling rounds the float up. So that is another term for programming called ceiling, meaning you're going to round the value of the float up. So meaning whatever it is, for example 3.14, if we're going to apply ceiling function to it, then it will be insalan siguro. If we're going to round it up, 3.14 mahimong? Anyone? Insa guys, if we're going to round up 3.14,
Try sir, 315 at 3.15.
close. It's gonna be 4. Okay, so we will going to round it man. So when say round, mawala na ang iyahang decimal place. So if we're going to apply ceiling function, so if we're going to round up 3.14, it's gonna be 4. Now the floor, rounds the float down. So if 3.14, if we're going to apply floor function, it should be unsa?
2 sir.
2, sir.
Close. It is gonna be 3. Okay? Decimal place man. Alright? So, ang pinaka-close nga from the decimal. So, let's try. Let's try the ceiling and the floor. So, again, we have 3.1416, and if we're going to round it up, or basically it's called ceiling function, then it should display, or it should round it up once, let's say 4, and then floor is rounded down. So let's check. Let's reload. Tada, we have 4 and 3. So there are a lot more functions for float, but in this case this is kanila to discuss, but there are a lot more functions, and then perhaps to learn more of it, you just go to either php.net or the W3 schools. Right? Do you have any questions? Do you have any questions, guys? Before we proceed with our assessment activity, I'm going to give you 30 minutes to create a program using this. Again, do you have any questions, guys? Mingon na kulog mo siguro yung tao. Ha?